everyone. I'm Elena Christopher, the Chief Research Officer of HFS Research. I'm delighted to welcome you to this edition of HFS Unfiltered. We are going to be having a conversation today about the power of operations and how operations can be transformative. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome two guests to our video cast today. Firstly, we have Jasmeet Narang, aka Jazz. Jazz is the Chief Transformation Officer and Head of Operations at Santander UK. Jazz, I believe you're a Santander veteran, having been in various leadership roles there since about 2009 or so. And I think at that time, that's when Santander acquired GE Money. Welcome, Jazz.
Thank you, Elena.
And then we're also joined by Rohan Souza. Rohan is a business process optimization expert specialized in the financial services domain and is currently Genpact's global account partner for Santander. Welcome, Rohan.
Thank you, Elena.
Okay, worth noting that what's interesting about both of these gentlemen is that they share some common GE heritage tied to Six Sigma process excellence. That's going to come back into the picture here. So what we'll be talking about today, this is a banking transformation success story, how Santander UK, the largest bank in Europe, with the help of its partner Genpact, is driving significant customer experience and employee experience improvements. And in the process, also driving some pretty important cost to income ratio improvement. So we'll talk about this today. And as I like to say, we may not even say cloud or core banking modernization. So let's jump into some of the questions. I'd like to do this in a bit of a why, what, how, and so what kind of format. We'll see how we go. So let's start with the why. Jazz, I'd love to start with you. Tell us a little bit about some of the market dynamics that were really impacting the operations and ultimately running Europe's largest bank. And what I'm getting at this is what we'd really like to understand is why did Santander UK want or potentially need to change anything about how you were running your operations?
Yeah, sure, Elena. So I'd say a couple of factors there. For me, first of all, in the banking space and financial services at large, actually, the customer needs and requirements are continuously evolving and changing, particularly during and after the pandemic. So it's we saw digital transformation and what customers want from us, the way they want to bank, evolving very, very rapidly to the tune of somewhere between 7x to 10x that you would have normally seen pre-pandemic. So we had to keep pace with that. The second thing I would say is, again, after the financial crisis of 2009, the late 2000s, competition was really hotting up and continues to be very, very competitive. So it's just not sufficient for any bank like Santander to just stay still and rest on its laurels. Unless you continuously evolve, you're going to lose touch with either your customers or your shareholders and not be competitive at all. So this wasn't an option. This was something that we had to do to make sure that we stay in the game for the future.
Got it. So based on that response, Jazz, I would say the why, if you will, was both making sure that you were dynamically responding to customer need, and also making sure you did not use the word disintermediation, but making sure that you remained as competitive as possible. Is that a fair summary?
Spot on.
Excellent. All right, let's go on to the what then. So, Jazz, so much of from what I've seen from HFS Research, so much of the change narrative for banks is centered on this mysterious thing called digital transformation. And you alluded to this, the pandemic really, it exacerbated this, like physical locations were really not in play for much of 2020. But as we also tend to see in a lot of our research, sometimes the so-called digital is really nothing more than a glossy front-end channel that really doesn't have the appropriate connectivity to the middle office, the back office. So you have something new and shiny and engaging up front, but there's still a whole ton of manual work that's being done in the back office. I'm wondering to the what, what did Santander decide to do to try and address its needs? And just wondering, in any of my comments, was any of this some of what you were trying to solve for?
You know what, Elena, that's exactly what we were trying to solve for, because historically, we'd invested in the front end, made that glossy and customer friendly and convenient and all of that. But there were plenty of people peddling in the background trying to keep up to fulfill those customer requests, those customer needs. And the good thing is that we recognize that, B, we said we're going to invest heavily in it. And third, we're not going to try and solve for all of that on our own because we don't have all that expertise internally. We're going to partner up with somebody like Genpact who bring that expertise to the table and do it jointly in order to accelerate that transformation. And the whole idea was we're going to look at every individual customer journey that happens in operations and bit by bit continuously evolve it such that we get to a point where it's fit for purpose for the customers, but equally can help us to transform the actual services that we provide in the future to our customer base and stay in the game, like I said at the start.
Got it. Okay. So then I'll try and summarize that. So based on what you just articulated, it sounds like the what in terms of what you decided to do to address some of your needs was very much addressing some of that front to back connectivity in the context of evaluating and enhancing customer journeys, and then bringing in the right partner to help you on that journey.
Exactly. That's exactly what the story is about.
Okay, got it. All right, let's move on to the how then, which is really, tell us about the process of selecting Genpact. I imagine that this was not a sole source opportunity, so give us a little bit of the detail. How many firms did you look at, and what ultimately sealed the deal with Genpact?
Sure, and I'm sure Rohan's got the scars to count for this. We went through a pretty elongated and I'm going to call it a rigorous process. We started with 10 potential partner options. Okay. We dwindled it down to, as you do, to the top 3, then the top 2, and you know what, the clinching factor for me to partner with Genpact was the cultural fit. It wasn't the commercials, it wasn't the economics, it wasn't who's got a better reputation or whatever. It was the values, the beliefs, and the culture that both organizations share. That was the clinching factor and why we decided to hone in and partner up with Genpact. And I'm really glad to say 2.5 years down the road, that has worked like a charm for both parties, because that relationship is still as open and transparent and fresh as it was on day one today. And I think that is because of the shared values and beliefs.
Superb. So appreciate that reference to obviously all of those credentials that you mentioned. Again, you started with 10 firms, all of those credentials, the capability, the domain expertise, et cetera. All of that is obviously wildly important. But I think it's quite notable that just that shared culture, which I think also ends up yielding shared vision and shared march forward to achieve initiatives, is really what comes into play. Rohan, we definitely need to hear from you on this. So I know from some of the details I've learned about this particular engagement, I believe it's a 5-year engagement, and Genpact, as part of this, has also committed to drive some agreed productivity improvements. Tell us a bit more about the mechanics of enabling this. And one of the things I'd really love you to make sure that you touch on in this description is that I believe that there's a bit of a balance of operating model improvement within sort of driving some digital operations. So a balance between operating model improvement as well as what I think at Genpact you call data tech AI led solutions. Help us understand how these mechanics all came together.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Elena. And I'm just taking the cue from Jazz from a shared culture and a value standpoint. The strength of the relationship started on a good footing on the back of this value and culture that we agreed is the ethos behind driving transformation. And when we think about transformation, data tech AI is essentially bringing all of the components and the power of Genpact together leveraging the skills of data, leveraging the skills of technology, leveraging the skills of AI and operations, digital operations together in solving for a problem or a problem statement or finding the solution and the right fit of solutions in that. So the committed productivity was based on a belief and the extended collaboration that we've had prior to actually winning the deal, where we understood the nuances, understood the challenges that the bank faces, identifying the right themes and the right areas to focus on to drive that productivity. And in that belief, we agreed that we will commit to those numbers and we'll work collaboratively to find the right opportunities to go after in enhancing the customer experience as well as the colleague or the employee experience. Because to Jas's point at the beginning, having the demand or the expectation from the customer needs to be fulfilled through the journey of the middle office and the back office. So bringing these things together is where we brought the data tech AI ecosystem in our organization together to solve for that. So that's the story of enabling that. The second point you asked on the trade-off between digital transformation operating model, I don't think they can be taken in isolation. They are a combination because the drivers of digital transformation or applying digital technologies has an impact on operations. So if we know upfront what that impact is going to be, then we can organize the operations in a way that facilitates the acceleration of that digital transformation. So I think they go hand in hand and they're not mutually exclusive.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense, Rohan. So if I summarize the how, if you will, bringing together Jas's comments and Rohan's comments, it's first, obviously, you need to be very clear about what you're looking for, evaluate all of the factors, but make sure that you're going to truly find a partner that shares that same vision and culture. That becomes very important, particularly when you're going to be engaged in a 5-year commitment. And then the how that I heard from you, Rohan, is when it starts to come to as I called it, the mechanics, but really the enablement and striving towards success, it is both part and parcel, the operating model transformation enabled by that data tech and AI capabilities. Fair summation, gentlemen?
Absolutely.
Okay, superb. All right, then, let's move on to talk about the so what, because at the end of the day, success is ultimately measured by what are you achieving? I think the talk about partnership and culture is wildly important, but you have to have something to show for it. So Jas, you mentioned you're about 2.5 years into the relationship. Santander UK, you've been very vocal about stating that you've done some things, really important things like improved your NPS score. I mentioned improved cost to income ratios earlier, but we'd love to hear a bit more about how you're viewing some of the achievements. So over to you, tell us more about the so what, please.
Yeah, sure. So I think that's super important, Elena. The journey is important, but the results are obviously equally important to continue to develop, to invest in, and to grow that relationship. So a couple of things to call out. It's the usual metrics. You've mentioned a couple. So I'm going to talk about productivity and cost income ratio, which was one of the drivers for us. We've improved the cost income ratio dramatically over the last couple of years in the operational processes. Equally, we've improved the NPS at the same time. So it's not as if one's happened at the cost of the other. Yeah. It's been a focus on customer satisfaction, customer improvement, whilst driving the productivity gains. And equally, and we don't talk about this very often, but for me, what the relationship has brought to the table is, what you find is in an operational environment, there is nothing called being static, right? The volatility of customer requests, the volume that you flow into a operating unit differs widely. So quick example there, when students go to university in the month of September is when we get a peak of the student account season. And suddenly within a period of a couple of weeks, you get a truckload of applications. And if you're not careful, you could slip on your service levels, and that becomes a really awful experience for what are new to bank customers and perhaps who would be, life customers for the bank. So with the help of the scale and size that Genpact bring to the table, we were able to really manage the volatility in the inflow of volumes that we get in the customer student account season, to be able to manage that properly. And there's several other examples during tax year and, for example, during campaigns. So I think for me, managing that to give a good level of service to our customers, new or existing customers, is as important, if not more important, than some of the commercial metrics that you drive as a result of that partnership too.
Got it. One thing I just want to quickly highlight in as part of your commentary there, Jas, is that you made a really incredibly important point, which is the pursuit of improved cost to income ratio. Very often, that means you've been able to bring down your costs, but perhaps at the expense of customer experience. So the fact that you did that in tandem with your NPS scores going up means that you're really taking that sort of 360 approach of not robbing Peter to pay Paul type of thing, actually achieving both. So I think that is most certainly a notable achievement. Rohan, I'd like to go to you with really the same question. Help us understand from the Genpact perspective, as being closely partnered with Santander UK, what have really been some of the results that you're most proud of?
So I'm just adding on to what Jas said, and he's given the fair articulation of the business benefits. I think from a partnership standpoint, we have to be a true partner for the success of the bank. And in this journey, what we've done is we talk a lot, we plan ahead, we know the seasonality challenges that the bank faces, and being prepared ahead of the curve and having those conversations and having those discussions is super critical for the success of the bank. It's not a success of Genpact per se, but it is a shared success for the customer experience at the end of the day. So what I'm most proud of is the openness, the lines of communication that we have, the honesty with which we plan for these events that drives the success for the customer, and inadvertently, therefore, from an income and a cost standpoint. So cost is a given now after 2.5 years. That is accepted. That is no longer debatable. But how do we therefore continue to push the boundaries of improving income, improving revenue? How do we partner to draw on the insights that we have in operations to continuously push the envelope for continuous improvement and transformation? That is the key to the success of our relationship.
Superb. To your point about costs, Rohan, I would state that given as we're sort of, you're all based in the UK, which based on everything I read in here, it sounds like it's sort of trundling towards recessionary economy. You can go country by country as to what it is. It really does put cost in a spotlight. I always say it's one of the top three, but sometimes it's number one, sometimes it's number three. So I think it's very, very fair. So I think I would summarize the so what from hitting both the ability of managing and really always putting in the spotlight, the enhanced customer experience, but also really driving the productivity and driving the modernization within the firm as well. Jas, you made a key point too, which is this is not some small isolated project. I believe that this goes across 7 different lines of business. Is that right?
That's exactly it. So it's quite wide ranging. And therefore the types of challenges that you're trying to overcome, the processes that you're trying to transform are quite varied in nature, and therefore the solutions are also equally, some big, some small, so you can get, going from a momentum building perspective, which is what we did in the first year of the relationship. And thankfully it continues to go up the curve rather than being static.
Indeed. One more theme on this, the so what point, which is this potential link between enhancing employee experience and how that impacts customer experience. Because while neither of you have said that explicitly, I believe that's part of how this equation works. But I'd love both of your thoughts on that, but maybe let's start with you, Jazz. Agree, disagree?
I totally agree. Happy employees implies inherently happy customers, right? No question in my mind about that. And I'm quite a big people person, Elena, so truly believe that. And for me, we do a lot of work. I invest a lot of personal time and effort and encourage the rest of the team to do that as well, to make sure that the folks sitting in Genpact don't feel part of Genpact, they feel part of Santander, right? Yeah. And the reality is they call themselves as part of the Santander team, irrespective of what they do, where they sit, and so on, and who their line manager is. I think that connectivity, and by the way, it comes back down to the values and beliefs and the cultural elements that we talked about at the start of the session. That is what glues the two organizations together. And once you have that, it's a really nice circle to be in, because it's the cascading impact of that from a customer service point of view is enormous.
Yeah, it's just massively important. Rohan, any thoughts on that link between EX and CX?
Absolutely. I mean, happy employees, as Jaz said, produce results. I mean, if you're not happy coming to work and sitting in those seats doing the same job day in and day out, how do you actually drive a better output at the end of the day? So in Genpact, we invest heavily on our employees because they're our biggest assets. Our employees know the operations and the processes at the minutest of levels. They know every transaction that they process. They know the pain they go through in an inaccurate or a flawed process steps. And those employees will only speak up when they have an environment which fosters that spirit of continuous improvement and driving insights. And investing in those employees and motivating them to say, come on, let's speak up. What can we do differently? How can we do this differently? Gives them that edge and that excitement of I'm sorry to say, sometimes a mundane job, doing the same transaction multiple times. And then having our clients, our stakeholders in the bank interact with them, spend time with them, continuously motivates them to deliver the results and the improvements we need that drives eventually the customer experience. And for us, the customers are both our stakeholders as well as our end customers. And we always emphasize that for our employees, that there are two sets of customers you manage. One is your immediate stakeholder base, and the others are your end customers that are recipients of that process. So think of yourself as, if I was opening a bank account as a student, what pain would I face? And therefore, how important your job is and the back end transaction. Linking those two is what drives that employee and customer experience.
No, it's a really sort of yet another link in that chain. It's a really great point about Genpact supporting its direct customer, Santander UK, and then the vast ecosystem of Santander's customers. So again, an extra link in that chain. And then Rohan, a big part of what I take away from your comments is you talked earlier about the data tech AI capabilities helping to drive digital operations. Literally, when you talk about people and that employee experience I keep referring to, you're improving what they do. And ultimately, back to what you were saying, Jazz, this is part of what enables both your productivity to go up and your cost to go down and your NPS to go up. That's that magic mix, I believe. All right, folks, let's talk about what comes next. You're about 2.5 years in on this. You've had some great results. Jazz, what comes next?
So Elena, there's a few things on the anvil, which is, firstly, I think as we've talked about, the relationship is going well. It's very strong. It's very open and honest. One of my key lookout factors, if I may call it that, is to make sure we never become complacent just because it's going so well, touch wood, and continuously keep an eye on it and make sure that we sustain that level of relationship and transparency and so on. So that's definitely at the center of my mind. Secondly, I think we've done quite a bit in terms of helping to continuously improve our customer journeys, our operational processes. It's taking it to the next level now and saying, look, we're investing heavily in this so-called digital transformation as a bank. How do we start to take it up a level and link the operational transformation that we're doing with the technology transformation that the bank is undergoing at large as well? And how do you start to link the pieces at the top rather than just the individual customer journey? So I think that's the next big thing that we're thinking of and plotting and planning as to the what and the how we're going to do that.
Superb. Okay, folks, so let's wrap this up. I'm a big fan of narrative closure. We've gone through the why, what, how, and so what of the Santander operations transformation. What I'd love from each of you is, based on what you've learned from this partnering experience, I'd love each of you to leave our viewers with one actionable recommendation for folks who may be considering going down a path or who are doing something similar, but maybe it's not going quite as well. Jazz, let's start with you. What's your top actionable recommendation?
So Elena, if you allow me, I'm going to ask that I say two of those rather than one. I'm just a little bit greedy. The first one is, choose who you partner up with well, because I think that's the most important thing. If you choose the right partner, it makes the journey much easier. And secondly, have that mindset of continuously improving rather than thinking of it as a one and done, right? I had a project to fulfill and I've done it and I've ticked the box. Never think of it like that. Think of it as a continuous journey. There is no finishing line, by the way.
Words of wisdom. Thank you for that, Jazz. How about you, Rohan? What would you put out there as a strong, actionable recommendation?
So from my standpoint, you have to be a partner in this journey. You have to have that. You have to be on equal footing and be open and honest of what you can and cannot do. So there are important measures of saying, I can do this and I cannot do this. Don't be afraid to challenge the business. You will only be a true partner when you actually put minds together and solve a collective problem. It's not an individual problem between the bank and Genpact. It is a collective vision. Share that vision, challenge that vision at times, but go after that together as partners. That's my advice to anyone out there.
Superb. Thank you, gentlemen. And I'll throw one in myself. I'd mentioned at the start that this was a power of operations spotlight piece. And so with that, I would recommend that, because I think that operations always is looked at as primarily run the bank and that somehow it can't be transformative. And I would say that's antiquated thinking. The digital transformation of operations is absolutely critical to, just as we've talked today, driving employee experience, driving enhanced customer experience, lifting up those stakeholders and making a better bank, as shown by improved NPS scores and improved cost to income ratios. So operations can be transformative. Thanks to Jazz and to Rohan. Thank you for coming to talk with us today about this great initiative at Santander. I wish you continued success. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elena.
Thank you.